Go, get over there, come on. Don't we look good as a pair? All right. So I'm very happy to see so many churchgoers this morning. And we are a congregation. There's no question about it. A whole group of well-intended, kindred spirits coming together. We don't all think the same thing. We don't all do the same things. Some people go to church. Some people think church is silly. We all do different things in our lives, and yet there's something that brings us together, a vision, a promise, the power of plant spirits. Last night, historic occasion. You were all outside under the portico as the rain was coming down. We took a good look around. There were all these little clusters of people, you know, smoking up and having quiet conversations and bonding together. And there were some funny moments too, though, I have to say. Our little group, we were up there smoking, and I guess we were doing a pretty good job of it. I think we were sort of holding our own. And people came drifting by. Those joints were huge, right? Okay? And people came by, and all of them oddly holding them up this way, okay? And they'd come by and they go, "Would you like this?" And two of them said, "We've had enough." And I was with Dawn and Caitlin, two of the Cosmic Sisters in our group, and we must have looked like we could deal with this problem. Like, we're the people that come to see when you can't deal with that joint anymore. And so you were like, yeah, sure, okay, bring it on. And then after a certain point, where there were like 7 of us in our little circle and 19 joints, we just had to call it a day, like, sorry, appreciate your problem, we can't take any more. So that's what happened. That's what happened. It's a shit show out there, folks. Just to change it entirely, we're living in very troubled times. We're living in awful times. I know people like to get together at gatherings like this and say, wow, you know, it's so great how everybody's becoming more conscious and things are getting so much better. That is not the picture I'm seeing out there. And that just, I wouldn't say it puts pressure on us. I would say it's a clear reminder that we need to carry the medicine. It's a clear reminder that whatever value, whatever benefit we get from this, we need to bring it to the rest of the world. Not necessarily getting everybody tripping, though, that might not be such a bad idea. Although I don't want to trip with Trump. God, or Jeff Sessions. What a terrible experience that would be. Set and setting, all wrong, all wrong. No, really. Yeah, a story you could tell. Like those horrible things that happen on the trail, and afterwards they're kind of funny, but while they're happening, they're not really so much so. I was introduced specifically to the language of bridging worlds by a 103-year-old woman, a Brazilian shaman named Maria Sina. And it was the first time I was in the Amazon. I work all over the world with medicinal plants. And we heard about this legendary shaman. And I was with native people who already were phasing out of the shamans or were speaking to phase. It was kind of horrifying, actually. I was this gringo. I was living with these Ipishuna and Quinicoro natives on the river for a month in Brazil. And they were kind of fascinated that I wanted to go see shamans. And you know, it turned out that I was told, you know, need to hire a boat. And I said, okay, I'll hire a boat. And then the morning that the boat showed up, it was this gigantic 2-story riverboat that was like 125 feet long. And I turned to my friend who had arranged this and I said, what the hell, Bernie? Like, why this? And he said, hey man, everybody's coming. And I said, define everybody. He said, whole neighborhood, man. So I wound up with this entire neighborhood of river people, and we went around to see different shamans. They were fascinated, and I was fascinated. And we got to this woman, Maria Sina, and she, you know, when you're that old, you get small. She was really, really, really little at that point and incredibly powerful, an energy that just came from her. They go, whoa, this person has done it right. This person has lived well. This person has brought all those forces of power and plant spirit and thoughtfulness and compassion and love together in one amazing human package. And she said to me, you bridge the worlds. She's kind of like a grandmother. She wasn't really accusing, but she was definitely making a point. And she said, you bridge the worlds. You have to tell people about each other. And she explained that this is a time of strife in the world, time of conflict, and that people need to understand each other. And even though I'd been doing that work for many years, I took that up as a cause, especially because she delivered that message. You know, because she said, basically, it's like a great-grandmother saying, go out and do this thing. Make this your purpose. We all have a purpose. That's mine. I bridge worlds. I try to foster understanding. I use medicinal plant trade as the artifact, if you will, that kind of makes the whole thing happen and supports my going around the world doing this. It's not lost on me that I fly millions and millions of jet miles to talk about environmentally sustainability. You know, I mean, I've probably burned more jet fuel than half of Congress, and I'm sorry for that. But on the other hand, it seems that the message is a good trade-off. So she really set me on this more intentional path of bridging worlds. I've been very fortunate to work with ayahuasca for a number of years, for about a dozen years, so not as long as some people, but quite intensively and extensively. And one of the notions that came up many years ago, actually due to a specious organization that put out misinformation for a time before they were hounded out of existence, was that the vine is critically endangered. That we're running out of ayahuasca vine, that this is a terrible thing that's happening, and all these tourists who are going down to Peru are creating a great big crisis and the forest is being destroyed. Sounds pretty grim. And this kind of went on for a few years, and there have been a lot of articles that have cited this original organization that never did any studies whatsoever. And at a certain point, I thought, gee, you know, somebody actually ought to go out and check it out. Now that we've repeated this story millions of times in the media. And so over the past year, a crew and I have gone around to different parts of the Peruvian Amazon, and we've surveyed people who are cultivating vine and who make ayahuasca in large quantities. And we kept getting directed to the Rio Tamaya, which is a river southeast of Pucallpa, the largest and definitely grimiest of the river cities in Peru. Iquitos is sort of the ayahuasca port of entry for most places, farther north up the Ucayali River, but Pucallpa is south, and Pucallpa was actually developed first, and it's where the Shipibo native people come from, and southeast of there is the Rio Tamaya. And everybody said, oh yeah, you know, I get about 100 sacks of this a month, and I make X amount of ayahuasca, and it's all coming from the Rio Tamaya. So we thought, okay, we got to go there. We got to see this. We didn't know it was a lawless land. We didn't know it was wholly owned by narco-traffickers. We were just la, 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 you know, just sort of, it was just like, nice day to be in a boat, you know. And, but anyway, we made our way from Pucallpa to a village where we'd been told was a 5,000 hectare ayahuasca vine you know, project. We were very excited to get there and discover there was no ayahuasca there at all. It was just somebody's idea of like, well, these people really want to hear that somebody's cultivating this stuff in big numbers, so we'll tell them that. And that happens on occasion. But basically, we went around, we met with loads of people who harvest, we surveyed the scene. We discovered that in the forest around Lago Imiria, where almost all of the Peruvian ayahuasca is being pulled out, that there are kind of two things going on. One, narco-traffickers cooking coca in the bushes everywhere and sporting automatic weapons. And people who are going into these forested areas and harvesting vine. So it turns out there's no shortage of ayahuasca vine now, which isn't a good reason not to cultivate. Cultivation needs to happen. For this to be sustainable in the future, we need cultivation, and many people are doing this. There's a guy named Francisco Montes further north. He's got 6,000 vines. He has so many vines, he makes fence rails out of them. Okay? He decorates the cabins that he builds with them. His staircase railings are ayahuasca vines. He's got more vines than anybody on earth. He's fine. Francisco, will you ever need to buy ayahuasca? And he just looks at us like, are you insane? Would Jay Leno ever need to buy another sports car? No, is the answer. So we came away while we were there, 5 people were shot dead. When I say it's a lawless land, I mean it's a lawless land. Usually you see the Coast Guard. Usually you see the police. Usually you see some of the federales. Nobody in that area. It is completely free of that. So it turned out that we made 2 discoveries. One, there's plenty of ayahuasca for now. That's good news. 2, it's extremely dangerous business. That's the part that we didn't know before. As you move through from one scene to another, you discover things. We come here, we spend time with each other, we hear from the speakers. Amazing talent pool, am I right about that so far? And I personally couldn't ask for a better intro than Theta's music. Give it up for Theta. What do these plants do for us? What do the fungus do for us? I mean, when I started taking LSD in 1967 at age 15 at a New England co-ed boarding school, for one thing, that was an expellable offense. I didn't get expelled till years later, actually, though, and it wasn't for dropping acid. It was for stopping the school for a time, which they found unsuitable. But, you know, when you do a revolution strike that puts all classes to a halt, it just turns out that the administrators get sore about it. But when I started taking LSD, it was like a crowbar to the gates of heaven. It was amazing. It just, you know, people will deny that these things are gateways, you know, because that has such a negative connotation. For my friends and me, LSD was a gateway to organic foods, to organic gardening, to environmental consciousness, to meditation, to yoga, to cannabis. You know, all of a sudden it was like, wow, okay, who's going to learn to cook brown rice? I'll learn to cook brown rice. You know, who here knows how to grow tomatoes? Or she knows how to grow. Anybody here bake bread? I mean, it was like that, you know? And it just blew open the doors to a whole other world. And so many people have the experience of engaging with psychedelics in any number of ways. You know, it can be just because you want to go to the beach and have a crazy day of naked frisbee. That's all right. Or it may be that you want to sit in a dark maloca in the Amazon rainforest while people are and you just kind of get drifted out into wherever it is that we get drifted out into. We all have an experience. And one of the things that I really loved about yesterday, that I appreciated so much, was that almost everybody said the same thing. It was kind of wonderful. Everybody came about it from a different place, but the net effect was these are agents of integration. These are agents of realization. These are agents of non-separation. These are agents that help us to understand not only our authentic place in the universe if we approach them properly, but that everybody is part of one living whole, and that we have a responsibility to this whole to uphold the basic and highest principles of life. That's what we come away with. And then what we do about that, that's our engagement. Some people are advocating iboga. Some people are painting beautiful, amazing paintings. Some are doing music. Some are lecturing on San Pedro. Whatever it is, the diversity is all here. We see biodiversity in this room. We get that. diversity of thought and interests. And it's how we navigate in the world. It's how we develop a fluidity to go easily and without too much difficulty from one scene to another. On 2 occasions, I have to go to a trade show every year in Las Vegas, okay? And Las Vegas is like the anti-psychedelic place in certain respects, and yet it is so flat out bizarre that it also at the very same time qualifies as one of the weirdest psychedelic visions you could ever have. Because, well, you know, I had this ceremony. It was insane. There were all these gigantic buildings with thousands of people in them, and they were all throwing money in the air, and there were no clocks or windows. It was like, oh, it was crazy, man. So on 2 occasions, I've had to go directly from Peruvian ayahuasca ceremonies to home the next day to Las Vegas. And you know, the first time I thought, well, this is going to be kind of interesting. See how this works. Is this going to be jarring? And the thing that was fascinating about it, it wasn't jarring at all. It was just a continuation of the vision, albeit a very strange one. It was like, okay, well, I just came from the place where the 3 little elephant guys with the pink noses, you know, do this to say hi to me. This isn't so bad, or isn't so different. I had occasion for 10 years, up until about a year and a half ago, I was on Fox News all over the world. And I got a lot of kind of blowback about that. Like, how could you possibly be on Fox News, man? I mean, look at who they are. They're scumbags, which all of that may be also so. I'd worked with a lot of the networks. Gone, you know, get called into them, we'd like to do a show, we talk about it, and then they get to the point where they go, you know, what you do would really piss off our pharmaceutical advertisers. We just can't have a show like this. And Fox, oddly enough and strangely enough, said, you know, what you do is so perfect for the pharmaceutical advertisers. And I was like, okay, there's an idea. And so for 10 years, I was the Fox News medicine hunter in 100 countries, reaching tens of millions of people, sponsored by, you know, whatever, ask your doctor if you need Nexium. And now the medicine hunter in Peru, or whatever. So, hey, I'm okay with dissonance if you're okay with dissonance. And oddly, to the general public, the fact that I was sponsored by Pfizer or Roche or whoever, GlaxoSmithKline, Merck, well, that gave me cred because they're credible, right? And this guy's obviously a hippie in the forest. And on the other hand, you know, it worked because it gave me a forum to talk to people all over the world. And what I tried to do was do about 8 or 9, you know, echinacea, strange foods, blah, 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 ayahuasca. And then, you know, ginkgo, new study on possible marine mammals that might be helpful for glioblastoma, peyote. And then Ethan Russo, who many of you may know, is certainly one of the greatest cannabis scholars on earth and a fabulous guy, wrote a paper on cannabinoid deficiency. And I just thought, oh, this is the best thing ever. So my most popular one for Fox was, are you cannabis deficient? To which the answer with Fox viewers is obviously, yeah, yeah, sure. I'm cannabis deficient, definitely. And I expected an absolute shit rain of negative commentary. I thought, wow, you know, I'm really gonna get it. And in the entire time, 10 years, I got 2 comments. One was, you're an asshole, which I found vastly incomplete. And the other was, you know, this isn't the kind of thing that should be on Fox. Maybe, I mean, I can't argue. But I got to do a lot about psychedelics. And what I found was that it really was a bridging worlds phenomenon. I love this group. I don't have to tell you that psychedelics are good for you. You know, I don't have to go through the explanation. Well, you might possibly consider the carefully controlled therapeutic benefits of psilocybin when used in a clinical setting with eye masks and headphones and a blankie. I can just say, isn't it good to eat mushrooms and trip? And everybody's like, yeah, man, right on. So you're your tribe. You're the people that I don't have to go through that explanation with. But there are lots of people to be reached out there. There are lots of people who aren't in this room. There are lots of people who need healing. There are lots of people who want integration. There are many, many people who do not know or accept that it's even possible. They don't even hope for it. And we have all seen folks who kind of stagger in from outside of this particular tent. And they go, I've tried everything. I've tried psychotherapy. I've tried this therapy. I've tried that therapy. It hasn't worked. I was on antidepressants. Then they put me on blah, blah. And you know, you listen to the whole list. And then they have the psilocybin experience. They have the ayahuasca ceremony. I don't know what Dennis and Wade were talking about the other night, that it used to be rough in the old days, but now it's easy for people now. I was like, wait a minute, guys. I mean, I love them both, and they're geniuses, but I was like, hold on a second. You know, the people that we bring down to the Amazon, I've been bringing people down for about a dozen years. My wife organizes groups that we go down together with people. I mean, most people get their asses handed to them. It is not easy. And then after a certain point, you know, you have those wonderful all-engulfing, bathed in love, you know, immortality and you know, just everything comes together at once. But there are a lot of people who go through rough experiences with ayahuasca. So whatever we might have been doing years ago, it really hasn't become a joyride. And by the way, how many people have drunk ayahuasca here? Gee, all right. We should almost serve it. And now the spirit plant ayahuasca break. Terrible idea, really, awful idea. I love it. People say, you think you could like drink ayahuasca and play sports? And the visual I get is so awful. It's like, I just don't know if I want a whole bunch of vomit-covered people running around with a ball. These are things we have to convey. And as I have said many times before, but it's worth saying again, you will never hear anybody ever say, God, that's delicious ayahuasca. It's not going to happen. You know, people come into these situations, they come into ayahuasca ceremonies, often they don't know what to expect, and fortunately there are many good facilitators and there are many good shamans, and there are people who know how to implement these ceremonies safely and well, and yet people still get lost. You know, I've spoken before about the terrible problem of the bathroom vortex, of going out to the toilet and just, you know, people go, where did Bill go? I think he went to the bathroom about an hour ago. And you go to the door and it's like, Bill? And from way far away, yeah, man. It's like, is the sink purple now, Bill? I need some information. You know, do you have your pants on? Can I come in? You have to bring people back. The lost. I've pried people off of trees. I'm good at that. I'm the guy that when, oh, Roger's on the tree again. Okay, I'll go get him. I'm good that way. I can kind of snap out of like, I was just wrestling a psychedelic anaconda, but I will go get Bill off the tree. But then I have a date with the anaconda here. I was in ceremony a few years ago, and we all drank heavily, and then I looked in the middle of the maloca, in the middle of the ceremonial space, and there were these gigantic spiders, like the size of medium-sized dogs. and they were slowly making their way to people's mats. And I was just not going to have any of this. And I stood up on my mat, and I pointed at them. Fortunately, I wasn't enough of a raving lunatic to say the stuff out loud, but basically I was telling them to get lost. And then later, the next day, I said to Ricardo Amaringo, the head shaman at that place, I said, you know, Ricardo, I saw all these gigantic spiders going toward the mats. And he said, yeah, we had to clear them out before we could start to sing. And now that brings up an interesting question. What is this? I mean, were there spiders there? Well, obviously there were spiders there. We all saw them. Were they really there? Well, what does really there mean? We had an experience. What can you take away from that? Certainly not that 45-pound spiders may crawl toward your mat. That seems unlikely. But what's a lesson to learn from that? How do you go from something that is so utterly bizarre and doesn't really seem to make that much sense, and something that you can never prove, like you're at home with your family? No, really, there were these collie-sized spiders, and with mind power, I was able to banish them from the room. Okay, and they're doing the speed dial on the psychiatrist. Oh, yes, dear. How do we grapple with this? Well, one way to think about it is that that experience, as bizarre as it is, could teach you to be more alert to danger and to be more observant of the forces around you and to know when to create a barrier, when to be cautious. And that's not bad information to have to fluidly flow through the world. You know, you meet people, you get sometimes right away, oh, this person's a hungry ghost. This person will take as much blood and oxygen as possible because they're so hurt and they're so sad and they need so much and they're just going to hoover the energy unless you do something about that. Or, oh, wow, I am in the company of a real total giver who's just open-hearted and this like torrent of goodness is coming from them, and isn't that wonderful? So we can get different senses of discernment. We can learn things from these crazy experiences. I died in ceremony, and that was inconvenient for Zoe. And I was sorry for that, but I wasn't there for it because I was dead, so I wasn't having the experience. But we were at an ayahuasca center, and Zoe and I like to check in with each other, you know, we'll hold each other's hand beside the mats. This whole thing about, you know, don't touch anybody in ceremony. Okay, well, I mean, yes, no shamanic vulva massage for sure. No, this is a problem. You know, these people, hey, this woman's completely tripped out and she's attractive. We have problems in the shamanic scene. We have to be responsible consumers in a way. But we like to check in with each other, so we'll hold each other's hands. And she hadn't checked in with me. I hadn't checked in with her for about an hour and a half. I had just undergone psychic surgery by some robots who were really careful and attentive to me. So that was strange. In a kind of a surgery that was like, you remember Get Smart, Maxwell Smart, where he kept going through, those doors would open and he'd go into a room and then other doors would open, he'd go into a room. Well, it was like the surgery was in about 4 rooms and all of the walls had faces of warriors and gods and shamans and amazing figures. It was like if you had to go into surgery, it wasn't really that bad. But I had just had surgery and she reached for my hand and it was cold. And she kind of shook it, and it was like rubber. And then she wondered what was up, and she shook it some more, and I didn't respond. And then she kind of sat up a little worried, and she shook my arm, and nothing happened. And then she'd check for breathing and pulse. And to the best of her ability to determine, that wasn't really happening either. Now, keep in mind, she's on ayahuasca, okay? I'm dead. She's on ayahuasca. I'm not having an experience. It's not one of these, oh, all of a sudden my ego was completely dissolved and I felt absorbed in the universe. No, there was nobody to have that experience. I was gone. Period. End of story. Not there. So she winds up on me, shaking me. And what happens to her is classic in the middle of an ayahuasca ceremony thinking, what am I going to tell the media? Chris Killam, who advocates ayahuasca, died in an ayahuasca. This is a disaster. You know? And then at a certain point, all of a sudden I just like sat up like, hey, back from the living vacation, what's happening? And it was all good. And now what to learn from that, I don't know. I guess you can die and be reborn. I guess that resets are real. Since I'd had no experience for a particular long period of time, I don't know really what took place. I know nothing took place with me. These things can happen. I once heard Ricardo Amaringo say that the one experience he hadn't had in ayahuasca and that he hoped he never had was dying in ceremony. It really isn't that bad. You're not there for the experience if you really do it right. And apparently I really did it right, and Zoe didn't have to be interviewed by the media about that the medicine hunter had died in a ceremony, and that was a good thing. Some of my experiences have happened with other plant medicines. I want to tell you about the Machendranath temple in Kathmandu, Nepal. In 83 and 84, I was in India and Nepal, and delighted by the hashish in the Himalayan region, delighted by the fact that every Shiva temple had a great big cannabis plant growing in front of it, that you would go into the temple and that the communion, you know, they're not serving crackers and grape juice for communion there. Good news. They're serving charas. They're serving the hand-rubbed hashish. And I was at this Machendranath temple in Kathmandu in Indrachauk in the way in the old city. And Machendra, in the history or the legend and lore of yoga, was a fish. Shiva was sitting with Parvati by a stream. Shiva was explaining yoga to Parvati. And there was a fish in the water, and that was Machendra. And Machendra became the first and greatest of all the yogis. And this is a temple to Machendra. So it's a Shiva temple. It's made entirely of metal. It's old, it's mysterious, it's spooky a little bit. And I went there for 9 nights in a row where these musicians who'd been playing holy music together every night of their lives for decades were playing. And I walked in, they were like, come here. And they, actually a little more time because it started 10 minutes late. And so anyway, they invited me to smoke with them. And that was the first time I really had in-depth ceremonial experiences with cannabis in that tradition. And we went deep every night, riding the currents of the holy music that they were playing, riding the messages of those songs of cosmic consciousness, of goodness, of kindness, of the joy of the gods as they understand them in the Hindu pantheon. And going back night after night after night with these people who sang this holy music and being completely suffused with that. And then, you know, maybe an hour and a half or so, they'd invite me up again and we'd smoke some more and then go back in and we'd be there for a few hours every night. And that was, I would say, probably the best catalytic experience for me in terms of understanding the deep and ceremonial power of cannabis. I thought last night was quite remarkable, actually, that we got this entire room full of people who, you know, went outside and fired up or did whatever they did, had their edibles, came back in, and we had this beautiful ride for a couple of hours. This is accessible to us. This is something, these are waters we can dip into again and again and again to refresh our souls and refresh our spirits. And there are two big reasons, I think, to do that. One, perfectly obvious, personal enjoyment, and I mean that with capital J-O-Y in the middle. You know, if we're not here to experience joy, I don't know why we're bothering. What's the point? And to convey that joy, to carry the medicine. I remember the first Thanksgiving after I started drinking ayahuasca. My uncle likes to sit at the table and go around, so, what did you do this year? How was, he kind of likes to go around to everybody, make everybody feel like, so, how's your work going, Joan, And so he got to me, so Chris, what have you been up to? And I said, well, I just got back from being in the Amazon rainforest, drinking a psychedelic potion with shamans to get over the grief of Mom's death. Well. But what was fascinating about the moment, what was wonderful about the moment, was that everybody at the table went, God, that's great. Good for you. That's wonderful to hear. They knew I'd been heartbroken. And for me to say, hey, look, this sounds crazy to you folks, but here's what happened. I was able to take that medicine, to talk that medicine through in a way that they could understand. And I heard some people yesterday, everybody's got different talents, but I heard a couple of people really talking the medicine, taking those transformative experiences that have shaped and directed them, have informed them, given them orientation in the work that they do, in the experiences they want to have, and in the ideas that they want to engender. And putting that out. If you have an experience of integration, what I like to refer to as mystic healing, the idea that true healing puts into order the body, mind, and spirit with the past, the present, and the future. And yes, body, mind, and spirit may be completely artificial and actually utterly nonsensical divisions, and it may be the case that past, present, and future are really just an idea, and it's all just this moment and never anything other than that. But we use language to describe the experiences we have. And there is this sense of when we're thoroughly immersed in the psychedelic experience, no part of us gets left out. No part of us. It's not like a halfway thing. When you're in ceremony and you're completely bathed in love, or for that matter, if you're in ceremony and you're mucking out the fourth sub-basement of your soul and picking the gum out from underneath the seats of your consciousness, whatever that experience is, there's no part of you that's not in the room. You are there, you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. Your toenails are having the experience. And how do you take that thoroughness? How do you take whatever that realization that has happened and just move it out into the world? If you really get that we're all interconnected, if you really get that we're all one, if you actually understand this is just one great, big, vibrant, bubbling, constantly shifting cosmic ocean, and we're droplets in it dissolving and re-emerging to the surface and going down deep and feeding the fishes and on and on and on, it's harder to create separation and opposition. It's harder to buy into the resentments and the hatred and the division and the nastiness and the anger that are all penetrating society right now in ways that I haven't seen this bad in my life, frankly. Just haven't seen it. I was in ceremony years ago with Zoe, and there were two things about that ceremony. One was that at a certain point, the entire place was filled with snakes. I mean, the entire place. All of a sudden, there were hundreds of snakes everywhere. And you could hear people in the Maloka, in the ceremonial space, murmuring, what the hell's with all the snakes? And they were everywhere. They were just everywhere for a time. And then they went away. But everybody had the vision. Everybody saw the snakes. Everybody was aware all at once, all of a sudden, that this entire ceremonial space was filled from top to bottom and side to side with snakes. And then after a time, they were gone. How do you explain those shared visions? Well, you go back to principle number one. We're all one. We're all connected. So I asked the ayahuasca that night, you know, I said, I'd really like to meet my plant spirit allies. Ayahuasca talks to me, says, okay, all right, we'll do that later on. So we were having this great ceremony, and the ayahuasca at one point said, so you want to see your plant spirit allies now? I said, no, not right now, you know, maybe in a little bit. And a couple times more came to me, and by that time, I was just dwelling in absolute love, lying on my back, holding Zoe's hand, completely absorbed in bliss and cosmic goodness and loving every bit of it, and my toenails were there too. And the ayahuasca, like about the fourth time, came to me and said, so, you want to see your plant spirit allies now? And I actually got pissed off. I was like, no. Look, this is where we're supposed to wind up, right? We're supposed to wind up in love. We're supposed to wind up in a place of universal consciousness. No, I don't want to go see my plant spirit allies. And the ayahuasca said, good choice. Thank you so much.